Ibrahim Traoré embodied the fierce spirit of a new generation in Africa, one unwilling to inherit the subservience of the past. He was young, charismatic, a military man who spoke plainly of reclaiming his nation's destiny from foreign influence, particularly that of its former colonizer. His rise was meteoric, fueled by a deep connection with the Burkinabe people, weary of corruption and external manipulation. He understood their hunger for sovereignty, their pride, and their desperate need for tangible progress. Every decision he made, every fiery speech, every challenging gaze directed at the West, stemmed from an unwavering commitment to Burkina Faso. His stakes were existential. The poverty of his people, the security of his borders, and the very soul of a nation struggling to stand on its own feet. His life was dedicated to ensuring Burkina Faso would never again be a pawn. The state Kremlin palace still shimmered in Traoré's mind, a monument to power and history. The summit with President Putin had been productive. Promises of military aid without the usual Western strings, discussions of resource partnerships that seemed equitable, a shared rhetoric of a multipolar world where nations like Burkina Faso could finally breathe free. Traoré had felt a surge of vindication. This was it, the tangible fruit of his defiant stance. His small nation, often overlooked, was suddenly a player, courted by a global power. He had imagined returning to Ouagadougou victorious, showcasing the deals, solidifying his support at home. But the planned departure itinerary vanished with quiet, unsettling urgency. His closest advisors, those few deemed necessary for this leg of the journey, received the new coordinates with stunned silence. Pyongyang, the message confirmed, stark and absolute. Not a transit, but a destination. Immediate. There was no preamble, no lengthy diplomatic preparation. Just a swift, undeniable redirection of their highly secure flight path. Why? The questions hung unspoken amongst the delegation, their faces mirroring the president's own flicker of surprise, quickly masked by resolve. The official explanation was vague, something about seizing a unique, time-sensitive opportunity for strategic alignment. But the lack of detail, the sheer abruptness of it all, felt less like an opportunity seized and more like a summons, a sudden mandatory pivot that hadn't been on the public, or even his inner circle's agenda just hours before. Traoré retreated into himself, the initial glow of the Moscow success dimming slightly. This wasn't just another meeting. It felt like the activation of a hidden clause, a next step dictated by parameters he hadn't fully grasped. As the luxurious, yet now slightly ominous, government jet climbed into the eastern sky, leaving the vastness of Russia behind, a profound sense of isolation began to set in. They were heading into the unknown, on a trajectory not entirely their own. The landing in Pyongyang was smooth, yet the atmosphere was immediately disorienting. The airport was eerily quiet, spotlessly clean, lined with stone-faced officials whose movements were synchronized with unsettling precision. No cheering crowd, no press scrums, just sterile efficiency and watchful eyes. Traoré and his small entourage were escorted directly into sleek, black vehicles, the windows subtly tinted, severing their visual connection with the city outside. The drive felt carefully choreographed past monumental, ideologically charged architecture and vast, empty boulevards, a world away from the chaotic, vibrant energy of Ouagadougou or even the bustling formality of Moscow. This was not just another capital. It was a meticulously constructed stage, where every element seemed designed to convey absolute control and ideological singularity. They were housed in a sprawling, opulent guest complex, comfortable yet subtly restrictive. Guards were polite, omnipresent. Communication with the outside world was polite, but filtered, delayed. The carefully curated environment served as a constant, silent reminder of their host's power and the limits of their own autonomy here. The meetings with Supreme Leader Kim Jong Un began swiftly. The initial pleasantries were warm, emphasizing shared struggles against Western hegemony and the importance of independent, strong nations. Then came the offers, presented with disarming generosity at first. Sophisticated military hardware that Western nations would never supply, advanced surveillance technology, even proposals for joint ventures in extracting Burkina Faso's valuable mineral resources, promising unprecedented returns. It was everything Traoré had campaigned for, the tools and resources to truly secure and build his nation. The temptation was immense. But as the talks progressed, the layers of assistance were peeled back, revealing the steel beneath the velvet glove. The military hardware required advisors, not merely trainers, but personnel embedded deeply within Burkina Faso's command structure, with alarming levels of access and potentially operational authority. The technology came with backdoors, granting remote access and surveillance capabilities not just for Burkina Faso, but a Burkina Faso by its benefactors. The resource deals weren't simple partnerships. They were long-term leases granting near-exclusive extraction rights to North Korean state-owned entities, with profit shares heavily skewed in Pyongyang's favor, effectively mortgaging Burkina Faso's future wealth. The trap wasn't in the offer, but in the conditions. Acceptance meant binding Burkina Faso politically and militarily to two nations increasingly aligned against a significant portion of the global community. It meant becoming a vector for their influence, a potential staging ground, a reliable vote in international forums, regardless of Burkina Faso's own specific interests. It meant incurring the wrath of those being challenged, potentially leading to crippling sanctions, isolation, and turning Burkina Faso into a flashpoint in a distant geopolitical conflict. Traore felt the cold realization settle in his gut. This hadn't been a mere opportunity. It was a test, a demand, perhaps even a price exacted for promises made in Moscow. He looked across the polished table at Kim Jong Un, whose expression remained politely expectant. Was this the plan all along? Use the leverage gained in Moscow to bring him here, to force his hand? The trap wasn't just the binding terms, but the sheer speed and isolation of the process, designed to give him minimal time to consult, to maneuver, to find an alternative. He was caught between the immediate, tantalizing offer of power and resources and the long-term, existential threat to the very sovereignty he fought for. He pushed back, his voice firm despite the tension knotting in his chest. Supreme Leader, these terms, they imply a level of integration that is significant. Burkina Faso values its independence above all else. Kim Jong Un smiled and wavered, but his eyes held a chilling resolve. Independence, President Traore, is a relative concept in the current world order. One must stand with others to truly stand tall. These terms reflect the depth of our commitment and the level of shared risk we envision. Think of the capabilities you gain, the security, the liberation from those who have exploited your nation for centuries. A subtle pause. The opportunities presented today are unique and time-sensitive. The implication hung heavy. Refuse and the promises from Moscow, the potential from Pyongyang, could evaporate, leaving him weaker than before, having alienated others without securing new allies. He was in the heart of the web, and the spiders were patiently waiting for him to entangle himself further. The night in the guest complex was long and heavy. Sleep offered no escape from the tightening vice of the situation. Traore walked the floor, the thick carpets muffling his steps, the silent guards outside his door a constant reminder of his constrained reality. He replayed the conversations, the numbers, the specific clauses in the draft agreements. He weighed the immediate, desperate needs of Burkina Faso, the fight against insurgents, the poverty, the lack of infrastructure, against the long-term cost of this binding alliance. His people needed security, resources, hope. Was he willing to mortgage their future sovereignty, to trade one master for potentially more demanding ones, to step onto a global stage where the stakes were astronomical and the rules were written by others? He thought of the young faces cheering him in Ouagadougou, trusting him to forge a truly independent path. This path, presented in the sterile rooms of Pyongyang, felt like a betrayal of that trust. But what was the alternative? To walk away now might mean alienating powerful potential partners, leaving Burkina Faso vulnerable, proving the cynics right. His decision wasn't made in a sudden flash of inspiration, but through a weary, calculated process. He couldn't accept the terms wholesale. That was a trap in its purest form. But he couldn't reject them outright, without facing potentially severe repercussions. The act of courage wasn't defiant, no, but a strategic yes, but a painful compromise forged in the crucible of impossible choices. He identified the most dangerous clauses, those granting operational control, those ceding critical resource sovereignty without recourse, and prepare to push back one last time, offer an alternative, less binding forms of cooperation. He would take what he could, mitigate the worst of the trap's features, and gamble on his ability to manage the consequences later. The final session was tense, a test of wills. Traore held his ground on key points, accepting military aid and some technical cooperation, but refusing the deep embedding of foreign personnel and demanding renegotiation on the most egregious resource clauses. The hosts were clearly displeased, the air turning colder. Concessions were minimal, grudgingly given on minor points. He hadn't escaped the trap, but perhaps, just perhaps, he had managed to widen a few gaps, to retain a sliver more control than was intended. The flight back west was different from the flight east. The unease remained, but it was now the heavy weight of decisions made under duress. Looking out the window, Traore saw not just clouds, but the complex, dangerous chessboard he was forced to play on. The message was stark. True independence wasn't given. It had to be fought for relentlessly, not just against old colonial powers, but against new suitors bearing gifts wrapped in chains. He was returning to Burkina Faso, not triumphant, but burdened, carrying secrets and commitments that would shape his nation's future in ways his people couldn't yet know. He had navigated the immediate trap, but the path ahead, fraught with the consequences of his choices in Moscow and Pyongyang, stretched into a long, uncertain, and dangerous journey. President Traore faced an unenviable choice in Pyongyang. What would you have done? Let us know your thoughts on this complex geopolitical maneuver in the comments below. If this story gripped you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more explorations of the hidden dramas on the world stage.